clear. We condemn violence on all sides. We condemn any and all human rights violations and abuses committed by all sides. So we condemn the violence by the ENDF and the Eritrean Defense Forces, and we condemn the TPLF's violence. We condemn the TPLF's expansion of war outside of Tigray. The TPLF must withdraw from Afar and Amhara. And we call on the TPLF and the Oromo Liberation Army to immediately stop the current advance toward Addis. We also call on the Ethiopian government to respect international humanitarian law. We're not taking sides. Innocent people, innocent Ethiopians are starving in northern Ethiopia. Withholding food and medical supplies is not acceptable. It is not an acceptable tactic at any time, and frankly, it's unconscionable and not what we would expect from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government must allow UN agencies and their partners to staff their operations with the specialized expertise required to mount an effective response. The reckless expulsion of UN officials are an affront to the United Nations and to the people of Ethiopia. The Ethiopian government must also investigate the terrible killings of humanitarian and human rights workers and hold those responsible to account. And it must cease all arbitrary detentions and ethnic targeting in Addis. Given the nationwide state of emergency, we are concerned about the safety of U.S. citizens, U.S. government personnel and their dependents, and the security of our facilities remain paramount. We will do everything in our power to keep our people safe, but we also ask that the state of emergency not be used as a pretense to attack civilians. We know, and you all know, the only solution to this conflict is a political solution. To that end, the African Union has an important role in resolving this conflict and sustaining regional peace and security. And I wish to thank President Obasanjo again for his efforts. Similarly, we support Kenyan President Kenyatta's November 3rd call for all parties to return to political negotiations, and also his efforts in this regard. Ultimately, the only ones who can bring lasting peace to Ethiopia are its leaders and its people. Only a wider dialogue about the future of their state, where all of Ethiopia's people are represented, can lead to broader democratic and economic renewal. It is never too late for peace, but the longer this conflict goes on, the harder the road to peace becomes, and the more people will die. And as you heard from High Representative Obasanjo, the window of opportunity is limited and time is running out. I urge all parties in the strongest possible terms to back away from the brink and lead their people toward peace and to resume the development agenda that will lead to prosperity for all Ethiopians. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we have listened carefully to the information provided by the High Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union for the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, as well as UN Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, regarding the latest developments in the situation in northern Ethiopia. We welcome the participation in today's meeting of the country's permanent representative to the UN. The Russian Federation has been watching with concern as the situation develops in the Ethiopian regions of Tigray, Afar, and Amhara, where clashes have been taking place between government forces and units of the Tigray Defense Forces, as well as other groups that have joined them, including from the Oromo Liberation Army. Fighting around the cities of Dessa and Kombolcha last week clearly showed that a continuation of violence will lead to new casualties and dire humanitarian consequences for civilians. Of particular concern is the ongoing deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the areas affected by the hostilities. In Dessa and Kombolchi, where a significant number of refugees and IDPs lived even before the conflict, the clashes have led to a rapid rise in the number of refugees and internally displaced persons. Due to ongoing attacks by the TPLF, the total number of civilians in need of humanitarian assistance has already reached 7 million. Humanitarian aid to all regions of the country must be increased. We continue to insist that it must be provided in close coordination with the sovereign government and in strict accordance with the basic guiding principles of the United Nations. Mr. President, as we have said before, the divisions in Ethiopia run deep and have a complex historical context. Moreover, what is happening in the country carries significant negative potential for the entire region. In this regard, throughout all of these months, we have called for stakeholders with influence to bear on the situation, as well as the media, to act responsibly, to avoid ratcheting up international rhetoric, and refrain from adding fuel to the fire of the already spiraling interethnic strife. We are convinced also that imposing illegal unilateral sanctions, threatening to use such sanctions, and refusal to provide economic assistance are very counterproductive and will only worsen the situation for ordinary people who are already suffering rather than reconciliation. There is no other way to resolve the conflict except to support national and regional efforts to end the intra-Ethiopian military confrontation and establish a dialogue with the aim of restoring peace and achieving gradual socioeconomic stabilization throughout the country. At various points in history, Ethiopians have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to live in interethnic harmony and build a common state. This was confirmed by the peaceful and democratic general elections held this year. The high level of support for the country's government was also demonstrated by recent mass protests in Addis Ababa. Mr. President, we're aware of the various mediation efforts recently undertaken by the UN and the African Union. Unfortunately, as the situation on the ground shows, they have not yet yielded significant results. In this regard, Mr. Obasanjo, we hope that you, as an honest and impartial broker, will take the necessary urgent steps to reverse the momentum in the direction of peace. All the necessary signals from the Security Council were sent in its press statement adopted on November 5th. We also welcome the work carried out in the region by the head of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths. We hope that these efforts will generate momentum for the work of humanitarian personnel on the ground, including in terms of providing uninterrupted humanitarian assistance. In conclusion, we wish to reaffirm our commitment to preserving the unity and territorial integrity of friendly Ethiopia. We are convinced that there can be no other basis for resolving all outstanding contentious issues. Thank you for your attention.
agradezco
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Mexico. I would, of course, like to thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo and Mr. Obasanjo for their very enlightening briefings. We have convened this meeting as a result of our deep concern about the situation in Ethiopia, the advance of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the mobilization of the Oromo Liberation Army, and the continued aerial bombardments by the Ethiopian army in Mekele represent an exponential escalation of the hostilities, whose effects are now spreading also to the regions of Amhara and Afar. The Ethiopian government's recent decision to declare a state of emergency clearly shows that if the parties persist in the military option, then the conflict will spread to the entire country and will have serious consequences, not just for the people of Ethiopia, who are suffering them, but also for the entire region. That is why we support and encourage regional efforts to find a solution, a negotiated solution to the crisis, particularly those undertaken by the Special Envoy of the African Union for the Horn of Africa, former President Obasanjo. In the humanitarian domain, we are concerned to see that the aerial attacks in Mekelle have already compelled the UN to suspend its flights to that city. This has cut off the entry of cash and humanitarian personnel, worsening, therefore, the living conditions for civilians. We are concerned that although food and essentials are available for the people of Tigray, they can't actually be delivered because of the lack of fuel and money to pay the contractors. The Ethiopian government needs to provide security guarantees so that at the very least the 2 weekly flights which had been operating until a few weeks ago to Mekelle can resume. All the parties must fulfill their obligations under international humanitarian law. There must be unfettered access for humanitarian aid without further delay. Mexico also takes note of the report of the joint investigation of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the OHCHR. This reports attacks on civilians, extrajudicial executions, torture and enforced disappearances, sexual and gender-based violence, the enforced displacement of civilians, denying access to humanitarian aid, the arrest and intimidation of journalists, inter alia. These violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law by all actors to the conflict must be investigated and punished. In this context, my delegation reiterates this Council's call to all parties to reach a ceasefire and for the conditions to be established for a national dialogue. Negotiations must begin immediately and without preconditions. Mexico deeply regrets the fact that, in spite of the indications of the destructive potential of the conflict and the repeated warnings by UN agencies about the seriousness of the humanitarian situation, the Security Council has not been able to avoid this conflict escalating. We are deeply concerned to see the use of bellicose rhetoric that stirs up animosity between ethnic groups. We know where the manipulation of hate speech can lead in such a diverse country, but we trust that this Council will have learnt from the mistakes of the past and will be able to shoulder this time its responsibility to facilitate a political process that will lead to peace in Ethiopia. I now resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ethiopia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor and for allowing the participation of my country in this briefing. I also congratulate you on Mexico's presidencies of the Council for the month of November. I recognize the presence of His Excellency President Obasanjo, High Representative of the African Union to the Horn of Africa, and Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo. I thank both for their briefing. Mr. President, a year ago, the Northern Command of the Ethiopian National Defense Force was attacked within. The unsuspecting men and women in uniform were slain in the dark hours of November 4, 2020. The long-standing service and sacrifice of the National Defense Forces is rewarded by unprecedented level of betrayal and treasonous attack waged by TPLF. Ethiopia will never forget the patriots and their service and sacrifice. The day will also go down as a day of infamy in Ethiopia's proud history. In this connection, I would like to extend our thanks to members of this council who stood with my country during this very trying year. Mr. President, in the past year, we reversed the military threat posed by TPLF. In parallel, we made all efforts to provide food and non-food items to people in need in Tigray. We signed a humanitarian assistance agreement with the United Nations. We spent close to 100 million for assistance and reconstruction. We declared humanitarian ceasefire and withdraw our forces. And we implored the treasonous group to hand over leaders of its criminal scheme and leave its rank and file members to live in peace. All this is proven to be in vain. It didn't help us gain peace. Today, I will not provide you details on the humanitarian assistance we delivered to our people in need. As a result of the continued and now widespread criminal belligerence of TPLF, the people of Tigray that needed urgent humanitarian assistance are not having any aid delivered. The people in Afar and Amara regions are rendered vulnerable. Cities and towns are shelled. Residents are killed in their doorsteps and robbed their earnings from their toil. True to its unscrupulous and cruel nature, TPLF is causing terror and mayhem. As we speak, Ethiopians in the northern part of the country are fending for their life and the life of their children. The trucks we sent to Tigray with food and medical supplies are transporting weapons and use combatants that are frauded or forced to fight against their brothers and sisters for no apparent public interest, but for the greedy-driven political agenda of a few individuals. Excellencies, we honor and respect the call for political dialogue. It is an approach we fully prescribe to and even applied in resolving many interested and interstate disputes. Inherently, our current situation is not any different. There is a deep-seated political difference and grievances in our nascent democracy. We are also a diverse nation and a home to 83 languages and many groups than headlines care to mention with unaddressed legitimate questions and demands. However, no political group, despite their grievances, have raised an arm against their brethren. No ethnic or political group, despite its unfulfilled demands, have waged war against the motherland. Diversity is not Ethiopia's problem. Our challenge is not, as some reluctantly posit, a failure to manage diversity. Diversity is Ethiopia's asset. Our problem is a criminal group that refused to accept equality and let go ill-gained supremacy and privilege. Unfortunately, this group garners support from many sources. Some media outlets in the West, some staff members and leaders of international organizations openly support the group. For your surprise, we sometimes learn the motives and the next steps of the group from statements and speeches of high-placed officials of these entities. As you may recall, even this council was made to convene over a false report alleging heinous crimes, including the use of anger as a weapon of war. Thankfully, truth has come out, and these malicious accusations are dispelled by a joint investigation report of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Our plea for members of the international community, states and non-state actors, to refrain from providing moral and material support went unheeded. TPLF is emboldened and numbed itself to an extent it stopped counting the lives of Ethiopians from Tigray, its sacrifice on its hopeless journey. It is emboldened to a level it threatens to unseat a popularly elected federal government and destabilize a nation of 112 million people. We again reiterate our plea for the support of this group that have been providing it with communication equipment, satellite information, weapons, and even fighters to desist from this. It is not only illegal, but also an immoral act. Mr. President, Ethiopia is pained. What we have gone through at the hands of this criminal group will require intergenerational effort to heal. For this, Ethiopia needs its children to dialogue and reconcile. We have time and again expressed our readiness and explained the preparation for national political dialogue. Had it not been for the bloodshed caused by the TPLF, even the political future of this group would have had a prospect of resolution through dialogue. In line with our commitment, we entertained the efforts for support and undertook the work with all our friends to learn from their experience and draw the available and relevant lesson and support. We accepted the High Representative of the African Union to the Horn of Africa and assist his role. We believe the regional solution is best placed to support us get out of this problem. This being said, our route to a dialogue and political solution will not be straightforward or easy. For now, we are focused on halting the TPLF and rescuing and reaching our public that suffered immensely under its cruel and deceptive methods. In this regard, we remind everyone concerned there are no two parties here. There is a government representing the whole of the Ethiopian people and representing the Ethiopian state, and there is a group advancing its criminal cause through atrocities. Any attempt, including the media campaign we have been witnessing in the past few days, to launder the TPLF and diminish the horror it committed against the Ethiopian people would only be counterproductive. Mr. President, what exalts my country as a nation is to overcome its own challenges. What may raise us as a country is the commitment of all Ethiopians to bring peace and stability. What is needed is well-meant insight and forethought and support. Statements of marginalization, sanctions, punitive measures will not help, or rather counterproductive. Out of our conviction to peaceful solution to all disputes, we will keep engaging all well-meaning actors, the AU High Representative, and regional leaders. In the course of this process, we hope we have the understanding of this Council and its membership. I would like to assure you, the Council member, that my country will prevail as it did in the past in the face of all its adversities. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Ethiopia for his statement. I would now like to ask our briefers if they have any additional comments to make. I don't have any other name inscribed on my list. That seems not to be the case. So I would now therefore like to invite Council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting stands adjourned.
Does that mean that we finished?